Before delivering an entire nation, God saved a baby from a massacre. He was raised as a prince, but became a fugitive, until, in the middle of the desert, he heard the voice of God coming from a burning bush. This is the true story of Moses, and it will change your view on purpose, identity, and calling. Subscribe now to the channel, Knowing the Word, activate the notification bell, and stay with me until the end. Here, every Bible story comes to life with emotion, depth, and truth. Now get ready, because God's plan is about to begin. From the desert he returned with a staff in his hand and a calling from heaven in his heart. Before the most feared throne in the world, Moses did not speak on his own behalf, but in the name of I Am. And what followed were 10 signs that brought the greatest empire on earth to its knees. After the encounter with God at the burning bush, Moses returned to the house of his father-in-law Jethro, asked permission to leave, and began his journey. Back to Egypt, he took with him his staff, his wife Zipporah, and his sons. On the way, he had mysterious experiences, including one occasion in which the Lord himself confronted Moses to circumcise his son, a reminder that those who serve the Lord must walk in full obedience. As he approached Egypt, God spoke to Aaron, his brother, and told him to meet Moses in the desert. There the two embraced, shared the divine calling, and set out together on the mission that would change the course of humanity. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the children of Israel. Exodus 4:29. They presented to the people the signs given by God and told them everything the Lord had promised. The people believed, and they worshipped. But the real challenge was yet to come. Moses and Aaron entered the palace. Before Pharaoh, Moses boldly declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Exodus 5:1. The response was harsh. "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Exodus 5:2. Instead of freeing the Hebrews, Pharaoh increased the burden of slavery. He ordered the people to make bricks without straw, but with the same quota. The people turned against Moses, and even he felt shaken. "Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why did you send me?" Exodus 5:22. But God answered, with words that still echo today, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go." Exodus 6:1. In a new audience with Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron received specific instructions from God. Aaron would throw down the staff before the king, and it would turn into a serpent. So they did. The staff became a snake before the royal court. The Egyptian magicians, with their enchantments, also turned their rods into snakes. But Aaron's staff swallowed theirs, a clear sign of divine superiority. Even so, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Thus began the series of 10 plagues that would challenge not only Pharaoh, but also the gods of Egypt themselves. Moses, instructed by God, stretched out his staff over the Nile River. The waters turned into blood, fish died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water. This is what the Lord says, "By this you will know that I am the Lord." Exodus 7:17. Still Pharaoh did not yield. God commanded Moses to stretch out his staff over the rivers and canals, and frogs came out in multitudes, invading houses, beds, ovens, and utensils. Pharaoh begged for relief. Moses prayed, the frogs died, but the king's heart remained hardened. The third plague came without warning. Moses struck the dust of the earth with his staff, and it turned into gnats throughout the land. Even the Egyptian magicians acknowledged, "This is the finger of God." Exodus 8:19. But Pharaoh would not give in. Next came a swarm of flies. God made a distinction between the land of Israel and Egypt to show that his people were being spared. Still, Pharaoh tried to negotiate, but changed his mind again. The fifth plague killed the livestock of the Egyptians. The herds of Israel, however, remained untouched. Pharaoh sent men to verify, and saw it was true. Even then he did not yield. Then Moses scattered ashes into the air, and boils broke out on the Egyptians, even on the magicians, who could no longer appear before Pharaoh. God sent a hailstorm with fire from heaven upon Egypt, a storm unlike anything ever seen. Trees were destroyed, crops wiped out. Only in the land of Goshen, where God's people lived, not a single hailstone fell. Pharaoh gave in for a moment. This time I have sinned. The Lord is righteous. Exodus 9:27. But when the storm ceased, his heart hardened once more. The ninth plague was devastating. A cloud of locusts covered the land, devouring what was left of the vegetation. Right after, thick darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. But in the homes of the Israelites there was light. God was showing that Egypt did not govern over day or night. The final judgment would come with unbearable sorrow. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn will die, from the throne to the servant, even the firstborn of the animals. Exodus 11:4-5. But God provided a way of escape, the Passover lamb. The Israelites were to kill a spotless lamb, place its blood on the doorposts, and eat it in haste. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. Exodus 12:13. That night, the angel of death passed through Egypt, and the cry was so intense that no Egyptian household was left without mourning. Then Pharaoh surrendered. In the middle of the night, he summoned Moses and said, "Get up and leave my people. Go, serve the Lord as you have said." The people of Israel, delivered by the mighty hand of God, left Egypt in haste, taking with them gold, silver, and clothing given by the Egyptians, a sign of divine favor. So the Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. Exodus 12-35. About 600,000 men left, not counting women, children, and foreigners who joined the caravan. They carried not only material goods, but the hope of a new beginning. God did not lead them by the shortest route, the way of the Philistines, so they would not turn back in fear of war. Instead, he led them through the desert toward the Red Sea. The Lord went ahead of them by day in a pillar of cloud, and by night in a pillar of fire. Exodus 13:21. When Pharaoh was informed that the people had truly left, his heart, already hardened so many times, rose again against God. He gathered his finest warriors, chariots, and horses. He set out with the most powerful army on earth to recapture those who had been set free. Israel camped by the sea under divine instruction, and when the people saw the Egyptian army approaching, panic took hold. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness? Exodus 14:11. Fear made them forget the miracles. But Moses, now firm in his faith, responded, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you." Exodus 14:13-14. Then God said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move forward." Exodus 14:15. Moses raised his staff over the sea, and then the wind blew all night. The waters parted, a wall of water on the right, and on the left, the people walked on dry ground through the sea. A scene so powerful it would echo for centuries as a symbol of divine salvation. The Egyptians tried to follow the Israelites, but God confused them, removed the wheels from their chariots, and sowed panic among them. Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Exodus 14:25. Then God instructed Moses to stretch out his staff once more. And the waters returned to their place, swallowing the entire Egyptian army. Not one of them escaped. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. Exodus 14:30. The deliverance was complete. Egypt, which had oppressed them for centuries, was defeated, without a sword, without armies, solely by the outstretched arm of the Lord. Before the miracle, Moses and the people sang the first recorded song in the Scriptures. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and rider he has hurled into the sea. Exodus 15:1. They celebrated not just victory over an enemy, but the faithfulness of a God who fulfills his promises. Miriam, prophetess and sister of Moses, took a tambourine and led the women in a holy dance, proclaiming, Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Exodus 15:21. It was the first revival in the wilderness, but the journey was only beginning. 3 days after the song, in the desert of Shur, the people found water at Marah, but it was bitter. They grumbled. Once again, Moses interceded. God showed him a piece of wood, which when thrown into the water made it drinkable. There the Lord issued a ruling and a test for them. Exodus 15:25. Shortly after, they arrived at Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. God not only quenches, he restores. In the desert of Sin, the people grumbled again, We wish we had died in Egypt, where there was meat and bread. Exodus 16:3. Once again, God responded with grace. In the morning, the ground was covered with something thin like frost, manna, the bread from heaven. In the evening, God sent quail. Each one gathered as much as they needed, and no one had too little. Exodus 16:18. The manna would sustain them for 40 years. It was the daily reminder that God provides. Camped at Rephidim, the people grew thirsty once again, and again they grumbled. Moses cried out, fearing he would be stoned. God then instructed, Take the staff and strike the rock at Horeb. Water will come out of it. Exodus 17:6. And so a rock struck. On the third day at daybreak, thunder and lightning tore across the sky. A dense cloud covered Sinai, and the sound of trumpets roared like a celestial storm. The entire Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Exodus 19:18. Moses went up. God spoke. There, before the entire nation, the Creator delivered the 10 Commandments, eternal principles that reveal God's character and the standard for human life. And God spoke all these words. Exodus 21. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. You shall not covet. These words were written with the finger of God on tablets of stone, a sacred covenant, but the people were afraid. They said to Moses, Speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. Exodus 20:19. The fear was the beginning of wisdom, but their hearts were still far away. Moses remained on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, fasting, receiving detailed instructions about civil laws, sacrifices, the priesthood, and the construction of the tabernacle. God was forming a people, a culture, a nation that would live under his presence. Meanwhile, in the camp, the people began to falter. As for this Moses, we don't know what happened to him. Exodus 32:1. Impatience, fear, and idolatrous hearts began to take shape. Aaron, under pressure, gave in. He asked for earrings and gold from the people and forged a calf-shaped statue. He said, These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. Exodus 32:4. They threw a feast, dancing, shouting, nudity, all in the name of a lie. In just 40 days, the people who had heard the voice of God in fear were now surrendering to idolatry. At the top of the mountain, God was enraged. Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have turned away from what I commanded them. Exodus 32:7-8. Then he said something terrifying. Leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation. Exodus 32:10. Here we see the greatness of Moses. He could have accepted the offer and become the new father of Israel, but instead he stood in the gap. He interceded. He cried out with passion, "Why should your anger burn against your people? Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Forgive their sin, or blot me out of your book." Exodus 32:11-32. Moses chose to die with the people, rather than reign alone. And God, in his mercy, heard the cry of the intercessor. Moses came down, with the tablets in his hands, and he saw with his own eyes the degrading scene of the people worshipping the calf. His heart broke. His anger exploded. He threw the tablets to the ground and shattered them. He took the calf they had made, burned it in the fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. Exodus 32:20. He confronted Aaron, who, cowardly, tried to justify the absurdity. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Exodus 32:24. Moses called for those who were still faithful. The Levites rose up. Judgment followed. 3,000 men died. But the covenant was still not restored. Moses went back up the mountain. Again he spent 40 days with God, this time carrying new stone tablets. And then something extraordinary happened. The Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." Exodus 34:5-6. Moses saw the glory, not the face of God, but his back. And when he came down, his own face shone with divine light. The people were afraid to look at him. Moses had been transformed by the presence, and even after the people's sin, mercy triumphed. But the journey was far from over. Now you will see the construction of the tabernacle, the glory of God filling the camp, and the moment when Moses, weary, cries out, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here." Exodus 33:15. After the sin of the golden calf and the renewal of the covenant, God instructed Moses with astonishing details for the construction of a mobile sanctuary, the tabernacle. "Then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them." Exodus 25:8. Every detail, dimensions, colors, fabrics, sacred objects, held deep spiritual meaning. The holy place, the most holy place, the Ark of the Covenant, the table of the bread of the presence, the altar of incense, the golden lampstand, the bronze basin. All of it was a shadow of a greater reality. God chose Bezalel and Aholiab, men filled with the Holy Spirit, to lead the work. It was not just about manual skill. It was about anointing, consecration, and holiness. The people gave so generously that Moses had to ask them to stop bringing offerings. "We already have more than enough." Exodus 36:6. This reveals something profound. When God is present, the heart opens down to give, to serve, to build. When the tabernacle was completed, Moses set up the tent of meeting. Everything was in place. And then it happened. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Exodus 40:34. Moses could not enter, for the glory was overwhelming. By day, the cloud remained over the tabernacle. By night, there was fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, the Israelites set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out, until the day it lifted. Exodus 40:36. It was the presence that led them. God was among them, but faith had not yet taken root in the people's hearts. Soon after the journey resumed, the people began to complain again. It was the burden of the flesh, the lack of spiritual discipline, the divided heart. They complained of thirst, then hunger, then weariness, then of missing the leeks and onions of Egypt. If only we had meat to eat. Numbers 11:4. Even with manna falling from heaven every day, their hearts murmured. And Moses? He began to feel the weight of leading an ungrateful people. Moses reached his limit. He wept before the Lord. Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? Did I conceive all these people? If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. Numbers 11:11-15. It was the cry of an exhausted heart. Moses, who had faced Pharaoh, now found himself being consumed from within by the constant complaints of those who had been saved by grace. And God, in his mercy, responded. Gather 70 of the elders of Israel. I will take some of the spirit that is on you and put it on them. Numbers 11:16-17. Thus began shared leadership, a lesson on humility, delegation, and relief for those called. Even after all this, the people insisted on having meat. God sent quail, but also judgment. While the meat was still between their teeth, and before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. Numbers 11:33. The place came to be called Kibroth Hattava, which means graves of craving. The people were being tested. God wanted to shape a faithful heart, but they continued to love their desires more than his presence. Not even Moses. Siblings were immune to rebellion. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, questioning his leadership. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? They asked. Hasn't he also spoken through us? Numbers 12:2. God heard, and he was angry. He called all three of them to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and defended Moses with words that still echo today. With him I speak face to face. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant? Moses, Numbers 12:8. Miriam was struck with leprosy. Aaron pleaded. Moses interceded. God listened. So Moses cried out to the Lord, Please, God, heal her. Numbers 12:13. Once again, the intercessor overcame wrath with mercy. Moses knew the glory of God, but he also knew the weight of carrying a people on his shoulders. Still, his prayer was always the same. Lord, if your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here. Exodus 33:15. Now we see how the unbelief of an entire generation kept them from entering the promised land. Israel was about to enter Canaan. The journey had been relatively short until then. By the Lord's command, Moses chose 12 men, one from each tribe, to scout the land. Send men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. Numbers 13:2. Among those chosen were Joshua, from the tribe of Ephraim, and Caleb, from the tribe of Judah. For 40 days the spies explored the territory. They saw fortified cities, fertile lands, and giants, the Anakim, descendants of the Nephilim. They returned carrying a cluster of grapes so large that it had to be carried on a pole between two men, but what gleamed in their hands did not reflect the fear that had filled their hearts. When they returned, the people gathered to hear the report. The land is good. It flows with milk and honey, but the enemies are too strong. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Numbers 13:27-33. Fear gripped the entire congregation. But Caleb stood up. We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Numbers 13:30. Joshua also declared, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land. Numbers 14:8. But the 10 spies discouraged the people. Doubt spread like yeast and turned into rebellion. The people wept all night. Then they decided to go back to Egypt. They said, let us choose a new leader and go back to slavery. Numbers 14:4. Moses and Aaron fell face down before the entire assembly. Joshua and Caleb tore their garments. Do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid. Numbers 14:9. But the people threatened to stone them. At that moment, the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting. God was ready to destroy the entire nation. How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me? Numbers 14:11. Once again, Moses interceded with courage and compassion. If you destroy this people, the nations will say that the Lord was not able to bring them into the land he promised. Please forgive the sin of these people, according to the greatness of your mercy. Numbers 14:15-19. And God responded, I have forgiven them as you asked. Nevertheless, not one of those who treated me with contempt will ever see the land I promised. Only Caleb and Joshua will enter it. Numbers 14:20-24. God declared that the people would wander in the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for each day the spies spent in Canaan. That generation, which chose fear over faith, would die before seeing the promise. Your bodies will fall in this wilderness. Numbers 14:29. The 10 spies who brought the fearful report were struck down by a plague. Unbelief comes with a price. Gripped by last-minute regret, some Israelites tried to enter the promised land by force without God's presence. Moses warned, do not go up, because the Lord is not with you. Numbers 14:42. But they insisted, and they were defeated by the Amalekites and Canaanites. God does not walk with those who try to overcome him in disobedience. Amid the long journey through the wilderness, a new threat emerged: internal rebellion. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram rose up with 250 community leaders and said, why do you exalt yourselves above the Lord's assembly? Aren't we all holy? Numbers 16:3. They sought to remove Moses and Aaron from leadership. Once again, Moses humbled himself before the Lord. And the Lord acted. If these men die a natural death, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the earth opens its mouth and swallows them alive, then you will know. Numbers 16:29-30. Immediately the ground split apart and swallowed the rebels. Fire from heaven consumed the 250 men offering incense, and the people were seized with fear, yet the people still murmured. So God commanded a sign to confirm his chosen servant. Each tribe was to bring a staff. The staff that blossomed would indicate the true leader. The next day, Aaron's staff, from the tribe of Levi, had budded, blossomed, and even produced almonds. This is how I will put an end to their grumbling against me. Numbers 17:5. Spiritual leadership is not imposed. It is confirmed by God through fruit. 40 years had passed since the people left Egypt. Those who had crossed the Red Sea were now gone. A new generation walked, yet with the same rebellious hearts. Once again, at Meribah there was no water, and the people grumbled, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to die in this wilderness? Numbers 24. Moses and Aaron went to the tent of meeting. The glory of the Lord appeared, and God spoke, take the staff and speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. Numbers 20:8. Overcome with anger and exhaustion, Moses stood before the people and said, listen, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock? Numbers 20:10. And instead of speaking to the rock, he struck it twice with the staff. Water came out. The people drank, but God was not pleased, because you did not trust in me enough to honor Me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them. In Numbers 20:12. It was a crushing blow. The faithful leader who had seen the burning bush, faced Pharaoh, interceded countless times, was now barred because of a single act of disobedience. Moses had not fully trusted. He took for himself the glory that belonged to God. He struck the rock, which represented Christ, and the prophetic image was broken. Later, the people grew impatient again. They complained against God and Moses. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? We detest this miserable manna." And Numbers 21:5. God sent venomous snakes that bit many Israelites. The people cried out for help, and once again Moses interceded. God gave an unusual command. Make a bronze snake and put it up on a pole. Anyone who is bitten can look at it and live. Numbers 21:8. Moses obeyed, and those who looked lived. That powerful image would be explained centuries later by Jesus. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. John 3:14. There the symbol of sin, the serpent, was lifted up so that faith could overcome death. It was a living prophecy of the cross. Even with mistakes and murmuring, God continued to guide and protect Israel. They defeated the kings of Canaan and Sihon and overthrew Og, king of Bashan. During this period, Balak, king of Moab, fearing the growth of Israel, hired the prophet Balaam to curse them. But God intervened miraculously. How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? Numbers 23:8. Even against human will, God turned curses into blessings. The people remained the target of his promise, though still spiritually immature. As the Israelites approached the border of Canaan, they began to mix with Moabite women and take part in the pagan worship of Baal of Peor. The Lord's anger burned against them. A plague swept through the camp, killing 24,000 people. But a Levite, named Phinehas, full of zeal, executed judgment against an Israelite man and a Midianite woman in the very act of their immorality. Phinehas turned my anger away from the Israelites. Numbers 25:11. Once again, God used an ordinary man to stop the total destruction of his people. Now Moses was over 120 years old, and he knew his time was near. God commanded him to climb the mountain and view the promised land from afar. But he would not enter it. "Go up into the Abarim range and see the land I have given the Israelites." Numbers 27:12. Moses then asked God to appoint a new leader. "May the Lord, the God of the spirits of all mankind, appoint a man over this community." Numbers 27:16. God chose Joshua, the faithful servant, to succeed Moses. Before the entire nation, Moses laid his hands on him and commissioned him. Moses would not enter the land, but his legacy was complete. He had been the voice of God in times of wilderness, the intercessor in times of judgment, and the leader in times of doubt. Now you will follow the final speeches of Moses, his last blessing over Israel, and the solemn moment when God takes him and no one ever finds his body. If you love Bible stories told with soul and depth, subscribe now to the channel Knowing the Word. In this final episode, you will hear the last words of one of the greatest men who ever walked the earth, and understand why his life still echoes in eternity. On the plains of Moab, at the very threshold of Canaan, Moses gathered the new generation. They were born in the wilderness, had never seen Egypt, but had heard the stories of their parents who had perished along the way. There the book of Deuteronomy was born, a book of speeches, a call to remembrance, a renewal of the covenant. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years. Deuteronomy 8:2. Recounted the commandments, the miracles, the failures, and the promises. Moses, no longer spoke as a liberator, but as a father, shepherd, and prophet. Moses pleaded with God one last time. Let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan. Deuteronomy 3:25. But the Lord replied firmly, that is enough. Do not speak to me any more about this matter. Deuteronomy 3:26. The leader who had prayed so many times for others now received a personal no. Yet even in discipline there was grace. God allowed him to see the land, even without stepping into it. At the height of his wisdom, Moses gave Israel the essence of their faith. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Deuteronomy 6:4-5. This verse, known as the Shema, became the spiritual foundation of the Jewish people, a daily reminder of the centrality of God. Moses called them to love, obey, and walk in faithfulness. His preaching was more intense than ever. He knew he was leaving and wanted to leave more than laws. He wanted to leave convictions. In the midst of his words, Moses gave a powerful prophecy. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. Deuteronomy 18:15. This prophet like Moses is Jesus, just like Moses. Jesus interceded for the people, delivered us from the slavery of sin, spoke the very words of the Father, climbed the mountain, and shone with glory. Moses was a shadow. Christ is the reality. Before he died, Moses blessed each of the 12 tribes of Israel. He spoke with affection, authority, and the maturity of a man who had seen it all and trusted to the end. Blessed are you, Israel, who is, like you, a people saved by the Lord? Deuteronomy 33:29. He did not die bitter nor frustrated. He departed in peace, knowing that God's purpose is always greater than personal dreams. The Lord led Moses to the top of Mount Nebo, across from Jericho. From there, God showed him the full extent of the promised land. This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Deuteronomy 34:4. And then Moses died there, alone but not abandoned. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, and no one knows where his grave is to this day. Deuteronomy 34:5-6. God himself buried him. It was the first and only funeral ever conducted by the hands of the Creator. The sacred text ends with an unmatched declaration. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Deuteronomy 34:10. He was a leader, liberator, lawgiver, intercessor, friend of God, but above all, he was a servant. Moses did not enter Canaan, but he entered eternity as a symbol of faith, perseverance, and total surrender to the divine calling. Moses died in the wilderness, but his mission flourished in the promised land. He did not live for himself. He lived to fulfill the purpose of heaven, and even in his final breath, he pointed to someone greater, Jesus, the eternal deliverer. Did this full journey with Moses inspire you? Then like this video, share it with someone who loves the scriptures, and subscribe now to the channel, knowing the word here, Bible stories come to life to touch your heart.